Hello, friends. Today we are going to see the very important topic as far as the Swift is concerned, that is optionals. This is the one of the greatest strength of the Swift by use of optionals. By using the optionals, you can handle the situation where the data may or may not exist. So in this lesson, we are going to see how to create the variables or constant that may not have a value. Then how to check if a variable or constant contains a value. How to create the safe clean code using optional binding. How to create functions and initializers that return optionals. And when to use the implicitly unwrapped optionals. So we will start. First, we will see the concept of optionals. So on this slide, you are seeing one example. Here we have defined a structure called as a book, having the two properties, a name, having the data type as a string, and publication year as an integer data type. We have created the instance of this structure. First Harry Potter is equal to book, name of the book, and the publication year. Similarly, second Harry Potter, name of the book, and the publication year. So one more instance we have created, that is let books is equal to first Harry Potter, comma, second Harry Potter. So is it fine? It is fine. Now the question comes, when we are having the, suppose that we have declared some property and we are not having the value for that. We don't know the value about whether it contains some value or not. In this example, suppose that we don't know the publication year, then what will be the scenario? So for that, we have created one more. Suppose that book is yet to be announced. It is going to be announced in next few days, but exact publication year we don't know. So one more instance we have created, that is unannounced book is equal to book names Rebels and Lions, and publication year is equal to what? Then what we have to initiate here? If you put the 0, it will be a wrong, because then it will be treated as a book is a 2000 years old. If you put the some year like if you put the 2019 here, then it means that it may released from the 2 years from now or etc. If you put the nil here, okay, then what will happen? It will throw the compiler error, because all instance properties must say during the initialization. You can't pass the nil to the publication year because it accepts the integer value. So at the compile time, if you put the nil there, at the compile time, it will throw the error. In this scenario, what will be the solution? So the solution is given by the Swift, that is called as optional. So here you can define the data type of publication year as an optional int. The syntax for that is int optional, int and question mark. You can see on this slide. If you use this syntax, the data type for the publication year will be considered as a int optional, and you can write then the nil. The by using the optional, we are treating that particular variable or the constant as it that it may contain data or may not. So it is fine. If it is not having the value, it is fine, and if it is also having the value, then it is also fine. So it will not throw the error when we put the nil, when we are having the type as a optional nil, optional int. Then next, how to specify the optional. So here one variable we are having server response code 4004 and server response code nil. So in this case, we have to define that like server response code optional nil and server response code optional int. Now, working with the optional values, that is a force unwrap. Now the question, we got the concept of optionals, but now the question arises, how do you determine whether or not an optional contains a value? So I will come to know that the optional will have the value. How do you access that value? So if you compare that with the nil, if you by comparing the optional to the nil using an if statement, if the value is not nil, you can unwrap the value using the force unwrapped operator. So this is the first method where you can unwrap the value by using the force unwrap. In the slide, you can see the example here, the publication year, we have compared that with the nil value. If it is value is not nil, then actual year will be printed. Actually, there is the publication year and print the actual year. So by using the, by comparing this, you can unwrap the value. Now what happens if you skip the comparison of the optional to the nils and you force unwrap an optional? If it is doesn't contain a value, the code will generate an error. That must, when we are comparing that with the nil, it should have the value. It must have the value. Otherwise, you will jump into the error. So next method where we can use by you for the unwrapping the optional value, that is optional binding. So in case of optional binding, you can use by the two methods. First one is by using the if let and by using the guard let. So first we will see the if let. The syntax for the optional binding, it look like if let constant name equal to some optional. Constant name can be safely unwrapped for use within the braces. So in this example, we can use it like if let unwrapped publication year is equal to book dot publication year. If some optional, if you are treating the some optional has a value, the value is assigned to the constant name and is available only within the braces. Okay. Now just like another if statement, you can write if let unwrap publication year is equal to book dot publication year. Then it will be printed the book was published in backslash unwrapped year. Otherwise, else part is there, the book does not have an official publication date. So this is the optional binding by which you can unwrap the optionals. Then functions and optionals. Swift comes with many functions that return optional values. Here we are considering the example where you have a string whose value is say 2123. You can see here that string could be converted to an integer. But what if the string can't be converted? Let string is equal to Cynthia, it let possible number int string. Swift infers the possible number to be an int optional type because the initializer for the int that takes a string as a parameter may or may not be able to successfully convert the string into an int. So while defining the functions and optionals, we can define that like a function print full name, first name string, middle name string optionals, last name string. function text from URL, and the string optionals. The same is true for the function that returns an optional. Okay, so that means there. Then the next concept is the failable initializers. Initializer that might return nil is called as a failable initializer. In the previously we have studied that int initializer attempted to create an int from the string and return nil if it is unable to convert the string. Here we have studied that. So for the getter control and the safety, if you want to create your own failable initializers and define the logic for the returning an instance or the nil. Here we are considering the one example called as a we have created one structure called as a toddler, having the two properties birth name and months old. In this example, every toddler must be given a name as well as age in the months. However, you might not want to create an instance of the toddler if the child is younger than 12 months or older than 36 months. So this is the condition. To provide this flexibility, you can use the optionals init or the optionals initializer to define the failable initializer. So here you can use like this optionals initializer init optionals name string, that is a birth name, string months old integer. Now here we have substituted the condition that if months old are lesser than 12 or months old are greater than 36, then you have to return nil. That means it is fail. So it will be initializer will return nil or it will fail. Okay. Otherwise, you can put the substitute the self dot birth name is equal to birth name and self dot months old is equal to months old. So when you use the failable initializer to create the toddler instance, an optional will always be written. To safely unwrap the value before proceeding to use it, you can use the optionals binding. So you can further use the optional binding like let possible number is equal to toddler birth name Jonna months old 14. If let toddler possible toddler. Okay, so you can continue that with the by the use of optional chaining. One more example of optional chaining we have given here. In this example, that every person has an age and may have a residence because residence is optional residence. A residence may have an address. Now, further, the residence may have an address. Not every address has an apartment number. So this is the scenario here. We have created one structure called as a person having the two properties. One is a age having the data type as a int. Second is a residence having the data type as a optional residence. Further, the residence may have the address or not. For that, we have created one more variable, that is address. Optional address is the data type for that. And further, the address may contains the building number, street number, and apartment number. And that it may contain that's why we are having the return time for all of these three as a data type for all of these three as a optional string. In unwrapping the nested optionals can require a lot of code. So in this example, we are checking an individual address to find out if he lives in an apartment. To do this for a given person object, you must unwrap the residence optional and the address optional and the apartment number optionals. So by using the if let syntax, you can have the conditional unwrapping. So if let the residence is equal to person dot residence, then if let the address is equal to the residence dot address, and if let the apartment number is equal to the address dot apartment number. So we can print the he or she lives in the apartment number slash the apartment number. But you can do this by one more better way using the construct known as optional chaining. And if you can go for like this, by chaining. If let the apartment number is equal to person dot residence optionals dot residence address optionals dot apartment number, then she lives in the apartment number, So when chaining together optionals, a question mark appears before each optional in the chain. Now, if a nil value breaks the chain at any point, the if let statement fails. As a result, no value is assigned to the constant and the code inside the braces never executes. If none of the values are nil, the code inside the braces executes and the constant has a value. So this is the, by this way you can optimize the code by using the optional chaining. The next part is the implicitly unwrapped optionals. Now here an object cannot be initialized until all of its non-optional properties are given a value. But in some cases, what occurs is what happens, particularly with the iOS development, some properties are nil for just a moment until the value can be specified after initialization. For example, if you have used interface builder to create the outlets so that you can access a particular piece of interface in the code by using the syntax, that is class view controller, UI view controller in bracket at the IB outlet where label equal to UI label. Now, if you are a developer of this class, you would know that anytime a view controller is created and presented to the user, there will always be a label on the screen because you added it in the storyboard. But in the iOS development, the storyboard elements aren't connected to their corresponding outlets until after initialization takes place. Therefore, label must be allowed to be nil for a brief period. So what about using a regular optional? UI label optional or the type optional? The standard optional will require the if-let syntax to constantly unwrap the value, providing a safety mechanism for the data that may not exist. But you know that the label will have a value after the storyboard connects the outlet. So unwrapping an optional that isn't really optional feels cumbersome. So to get around this issue, the Swift provides the syntax for the implicitly unwrapped optional using the exclamation mark instead of question mark. As the name suggests, this type of optional unwraps automatically whenever it's used in the code. This allows you to use the label as a though it weren't an optional. This while allowing the view controller to be initialized without it. So implicitly unwrapped optional should be used in one special case when you need to initialize an object without supplying the value, but you know you will be giving the object a value before any other code tries to access it. It might seem convenient to overuse implicitly unwrapped optionals to save yourself from using if-let syntax, but by doing so, you would remove an important safety feature from the language. Thus, many Swift developers consider too many exclamatory marks in the code a red flag. So if you try to access the value of an implicitly unwrapped optional and the value is nil, your program crashes. So this is the one of the concept of the implicitly unwrapped optionals. So if we summarize the optionals, we have studied what is the optionals, why we require the need for the optionals. With the example, we have studied the how to use the optionals, then specifying the type of optionals, how to specify the type of optional, how to unwrap the optionals value by using the force unwrap, by using the optionals binding, whether it may be a flat or the guardlet syntax, then functions and optionals with the written values, then defining, then failable initializers, one of the concept, then optional chaining, and finally implicitly unwrapped optionals. Now we have not used playground here, so we will try to run this code into the playground. We will see here. Okay, so I will go to the Xcode. file, new playground, blank playground. I will name that playground as a optionals. We'll create this playground. Then if you use this code into the playground, so we'll try to put this into the uh, playground. So here we have let books. When we compile this, you have to print here. If I print books here, then you can see, okay, Harry Potter and Sorcerer. Okay, so this will be the thing here. Now we will try with the unannounced book. If you go here with the unannounced book, you can see it is not taking this question mark, cannot find the operator in the scope. That means you cannot, if you don't know the publication, you cannot use the question mark. Now we will use some value 2019, then we will see. If you put nil here, then we'll see. If you put the nil here, then the error. Nil is not compatible with the expected argument type int. This is the argument type int. That means it will throw the error. Compiler is throwing error. Now if I change this to the string int optional, then this error will be, you will see what happens with the error. And I change this, and then you can see what happens with the error. Okay, you can see the error gone. That means when we are changing this type of this to the int optionals, the error is not there. Similarly, you can run the code on next code on the force unwrap code on the and optional chaining with the on the playground. So we'll run this code struct code toddler on the playground. Then failable initializers will have okay. So if you run this, toddler. The Jonah is 14 months old. Okay, so we have substituted the value of months old 14. Suppose that if I put lesser value lesser than 12, then what will happen? We'll put here. If I change that to the 10 months, then you'll have the age you specified for the toddler not between 1 and 3 years of age. Okay, so this will be the case. Greater than 36, suppose that we have substituted 37 months here, then we'll see what will happen. Okay, so the same syntax will be there. And if I put the within the range, suppose that 14, then you can have the value as a 14 months old. Super cool. Similarly, optional chainings you can run. Okay, so here we'll have the structure, person, have the playground, then optional chaining I can use here if let. If you run this, one second, it should be here. We have not created the person object, so we have to create let person equal to person okay. Age supported 23, residence. We'll put the nil here. And if you run this, let's see what will happen. So residence is having the nil value. So if I put the value here, like Ahmednagar, then we'll see what will happen. One second. This is a string type. So here we cannot convert that. So we'll put the nil here. Okay, so by this way you can use the optional chaining. And finally, implicitly enumerate optionals. So all the concepts, basic concepts related with the optionals we have completed. For the practice session, you can use go the exercise for the optionals lab optionals dot playground. You can use that for the exercise. Please like and subscribe. Thanks, thanking you.